Yep.
Got your book open?
Yep.
Part 2, a genocidal war. The war for the cities is part of a larger war. It is not an end in itself. The larger war involves Africans, black people, other oppressed nations, native nations, indigenous people, Chicanos, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and the masses of the American imperialist state. All oppressed people inside U.S. borders are pitting against those who rule America in a war to determine the future of the cities. The war for the cities is a small example, a reflection of the larger war. One way to define this large war is easily understood terms is to define it as genocidal. What is genocide? Most of us use the word genocide incorrectly because we don't apply it broadly enough. We think that genocide only in relations to Schmittler, Jewish people, and gas ovens. After Africans in America think of genocide, all we see are millions of some other people being unalived, all at once, in some places besides America. In the past, some Africans may think of genocide as in relations to native nations, people, but even here we tend to associate the victims of genocide with someone other than ourselves. And even those Africans who think of genocide in relations to African people in America merely point to the period of chattel slavery, or only to those areas where Africans' lives are taken by the lynch mob and by the police bullet, or in the areas of sterilization. We must see that whenever we speak of our oppression, black people's oppression and exploitation in any form, we're speaking of the genocide being practiced against us, black people, not me as white person. The very word genocide, which was first used by Raphael Temhin, Temhin, means the physical, political, social, cultural, biological, economic, religious, and moral oppression of a people. Article 2 of the Convention of the Prevention of and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on December 9th, 1948, states in part that genocide means any of the following acts committed with even the intent to destroy a whole or in part a national, ethical, racial, or religious groups as such. Here we go. We're going to go over this. Who's in the queue? I don't know who that is. Can I speak? No, I'm reading. You can come back afterwards. After the reading's done, you can come back and have the conversation with us. A, killing members of a group. B, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. When looked at from this perspective, we see that genocide occurs when any members of a group is killed. When one of our brothers or sisters is shot by city police, or when one of our sisters or brothers is shot or beaten to death by a prison guard. Either case is an actual instance of genocide against the entire group. An African killed on 47th Street, or an African killed inside Stateville is an African killed. It's genocide being committed against all African people the genocide is nothing but the oppression of the nation in many forms through which our national oppression was initiated and is maintained. Oh my gosh, what are these people saying? Hold on. Oh yes, commie who read relevant thought to our current conditions. Yes, it is current. Anyways, Frantz Fanon is a phony hypocrite. How to wait? Oh my gosh, shut up. Any form of this is Yaki. That's not even the author of this book. You don't read. Any form of serious bodily or mental harm inflicted upon any one African is an instance of genocide against the nation. No matter where this takes place, in the cities or in prison, is genocide against us all. Brothers and sisters in prisons are forced into behavior modification programs and institutions and are made to undergo behavior modifying surgeries and filled with behavior modifying drugs. At the same time, our brothers and sisters, our children, are forced into similar programs and institutions outside the walls in the cities and are made to undergo surgery. Our children are filled with behavior modifying drugs in the enemy's controlled schools. Yeah. This behavior modification, all forms of serious bodily harm or mental injury inflicted upon any single African individual, is a means of maintaining our collective political oppression. The physical brutality which maims us, the psychological injuries which numb us, push us towards forms of escaping reality and which drive us to increasing numbers of self-unalignment. Yay! These guys are they're already reporting me. All these are symptoms of our economic oppression, our social and cultural oppression, and its G-side. Our every condition of life is manifestation of the G-side being practiced against us. This miseducation of our children, the bad housing and food, short life expectancies, unemployment, lack of adequate medical facilities in our communities, the instability of our families, high mortality rates of our mothers and infants. All these and more constitutes G-side. Whenever Africans in America talk of changing the conditions under which we now live, we're talking about ending G-side. If we talk about a, quote, push for excellence in education, we better understand that we're talking about bringing an end to the G-sidal treatment of our children in the enemy-controlled schools. The conditions of life experienced by our people in the cities are genocidal conditions. The conditions of life experienced in the war for the cities, as we are forced to relocate our communities, are aimed at maintaining our political, economic, social, and cultural oppression. So when we talk about freedom and national liberation, we are talking about the ending G-side, about ending G-side. When we talk about independence, truth, and justice, we're talking about ending G-side. And whenever we talk about ending G-side in any of its forms, we are talking about self-determination for our people, about self-government, about black state power. G-sidal 1 can be committed with the intent to destroy a group. The intent needed not to be fully realized before the group can be legitimately recognized as a group of G-sidal practices. 2, G-side can be practiced against the group if the intent is to destroy that group, quote, in whole or in part, end quote. In other words, G-side can be committed against a single individual's belonging to a group. 3, G-sides can occur without an actual unaliving of members of the group. G-sides can exist where seriously bodily or mental harm is inflicted on members of the group, and environmental conditions of life are such that the physical destructions of the group is threatened and where any one or more forms of such oppression exist, and to prevent the group's progressive, self-determined development. That's what they're doing now with the like the huge server the super server places, you know, for AI, is near black communities, and it's destroying them and causing for more pollution. Genocide is a conscious, systematic policy practiced upon Africans, black people, by those who rule America, and it is carried out on all levels by both public and private political, economic, and socio-cultural institutions. In one form or another, genocide has been practiced against us for more of Africa. It progressed with the Euro-American slave trade, during which millions of Africans unalived during the Middle Passage, quote unquote. All the deaths of Africans on slave ships at the hand of village raiders and kidnappers, plantation owners, masked night raiders, and city police were acts of genocide. The plantation alone didn't undermine our culture and destroyed our families. America destroyed our culture, ripped our families apart, and took away our freedoms and independence as self-governed people. America is still an enemy, and today it uses its prisons as genocidal weapons. American prisons are instruments used by practice political, economic, and social oppression of African people. Prisons are used to practice genocide, to practice physical and mental destructions of the group, and as one of the instruments used to prevent the group's successful struggle for liberation. American prisons are concentration camps. The entire U.S. criminal justice system, quote unquote, is used as an arm of the government to repress and destroy the national liberation struggle. Part 3. The war of the cities of America should be looked upon as a means to an end, and not as an end in itself. The cities are the nerve centers for the American nation, and act in ways similar to the nerves and blood vessels of a human body. The cities pump life into the nation. Many cities are combined to form nation/states. In modern societies, the city is the center of trade, commerce, and industry. The lifeblood of a nation passing through the cities, similar to the way blood passes through the heart. The modern city is the center of communication, culture, the brain, and its nerves, sending message and impulses to other parts of the body, making it possible for the body to move, breathe, feed itself, find shelter, and protect itself from harmful negative elements. Those who rule America are locked in battle with us in a war for the cities. This war will decide America's fate and our town. America seeks to maintain control of the cities so that it can maintain its life. We seek control of the cities to use them in making a new life for ourselves. America wants to remain a nation, and we want to build a nation. America wants to suppress the new life, the creativity and independence which stirs within us. We intend to destroy the U.S., a nation which oppresses and exploits others, because this is the only way we can survive the present and growing beyond survival to develop new ways of life. The question this is a quote, I think. This is a quote. Hey, the restriction's still there. Bastards. Oh, it's still it's 2 more minutes. I wonder if I'll get another one afterwards. The question I've asked myself over the years runs this way. Who has done most of the dying? Who, most of the work? Most of the time in prison on Max Row? Who is the bindmost in every aspect of social, political, and economic life? Who has the least short-term interest, or no interest at all, in the survival of the present state? In this condition, how could we believe in the possibility of a new generation of enlightened fascists who would dismantle the basis of their hierarchies? Just how many Americans are willing to accept the physical destruction of some part of their fatherland so that the rest of the land and the world might survive in good health? How can black industrial workers be induced to carry out a valid workers' revolutionary policy? What and who will guide him? The commune? The central citywide revolutionary culture? But who will bind the commune that will guide people into a significant challenge of property rights? Carving out a commune in central cities will involve claiming certain rights as our own out front, rights that have not been respected to now, property rights. It will involve building a political and social and economic infrastructure capable of filling the vacuum that has been left by the establishment ruling class and pushing the occupying forces of the enemy culture from our midst. The implementation of this new social, political, and economic program will feed and comfort all the people on at least as subsistent level and force the quote owners of the enemy bourgeois culture either to tie their whole fortunes to the commune and the people, or have the land, or to leave the land, the tools, and the market behind. If he will not leave voluntarily, we will expel him. We will use the pew-pew gun, the anti-tank rocket launcher. Comrade, brother George Jackson, blood in my eye. We began with the fact that there is a vacuum which has been created by the absence of, quote, goods and services in our communities. This vacuum serves to weaken our areas and to weaken us as people/nations, to lessen our power of resistance. Those who rule America have deliberately gone about the businesses of making us depending on its, quote, boards of education, its courts of justice, quote unquote, its welfare agency, city housing authority, etc. America has broken the sense of community that used to abound in our neighborhoods, and in this way makes people feel isolated from each other and dependent upon the state to solve all problems and satisfy all needs and to define all wants. People on the block used to stick together. The neighborhood was a big, quote, extended family. The children were the responsibility of the community, and all members of the community were responsible to and for each other. Young black brothers and sisters should ask older bloods what our, quote, hoods were like in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even early 60s. We need to check our history and give special attention to the northern migration. When we started moving to the southern cities, the northern cities, in the years following the emancipation, the first 2 decades of this century, the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s, the more urbanized and Americanized black people became, the more we abandoned each other, and the more shanky our family social structures became. We came to depend less and less on each other, and to depend more and more on the oppressive state. Therefore, the first phase of our war for the cities must involve recreating a sense of community. If black, non-white, poor people are to survive and have a future in America, we must become responsible to and for each other. We must have mutual respect. We must come to depend on ourselves/each other and break our dependency upon the enemy. We must accept the fact that those who rule America are neither willing nor capable of satisfying our needs. It is not in their interest to have us employed, fed, clothed, properly housed, educated, and healthy. Build to win. All right, next one. Free the RNA 11 prisoners of war. RNA is the new, the Republic of New Africa. Malcolm X, it's really, I think they take guidance from Malcolm X and stuff like that. So, you can, there's a book called Free the Land. Wait, is it called Free the Land? I think it's called Free the Land. Yeah. Goes over a little bit of the history of the RNA. On March 31st, 1968, 500 black nationalists from throughout the U.S. met in Detroit and issued a Declaration of Independence for the Black Nation. The subjugated Black Nation, the new African nation in North America, dates back to the anti-black colonial laws of the 1660s. The first land under New Africa governments was in Mississippi Valley and the South Carolina, Georgia, Sea Islands during and just after the American Civil War. I'm sorry, I do that. In 1968, Detroit Convention, 1, named the nation the Republic of New Africa. 2, designated the 5 states of the Deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, as the subjugated national territory. And 3, created basic laws and a formal provisional government with officials elected in conventions under the mandate to, quote, free the land. As with all nations, RNA citizens are born into it. All black people descendants of slaves born in North America are citizens of the Black Nation, the Republic of New Africa. Black people may choose to give up their new African citizenship, or they may choose to have dual RNA USA citizenship. But new African citizenship is a right of birth, and the right of choice in this matter lies at the heart of the independence struggles. I think it meant struggles, but it says straggle. In 1970, Brother Amira Obadel, elected second president in the convention, moved the center of the struggle to the Deep South, seeking to organize and open plebiscites, a popular vote on the question of RNA versus USA citizenship, and on the right of the Black Nation, the RNA, to sovereignty over the Kush districts, the 20,000 square miles of black counties and parishes lying 350 miles along the Mississippi River from Memphis to New Orleans. 6 weeks after the RNA provisional government held a successful reparation convention at Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Jackson, Mississippi, the police and the FBI attacked Jackson's white mayor, Russell Davis, was quoted in the press as saying that the attack occurred after white officials had, quote, explored all legal means for driving the RNA out. At 6:30 on the morning of August 18th, 1971, a force of heavily armed Jackson policemen and FBI agents surrounded the official residence of President Amir Obadel of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa. Inside were 7 persons: 15-year-old Kiram, who lived there, and Ofego, and Nigeria Kwadas, pregnant, and Brother Chama, 19, who also lived there, and 3 visitors: Vice President Hakeem Ann of Milwaukee and his wife, Temu Sana, recently returned from the University of Ghana, and Adias Abiba of Detroit. The 3 had arrived less than 48 hours earlier. Tanu and Hakima were starting their vacation on their way to Georgia. They occupied Brother Amir's bedroom, the window of which, like the windows of Brother Ofego and Nairis, bedrooms looked out into the spacious backyard. Brother Amir, a young woman, and two young men, somehow unknown to the usually vigilant FBI, were spending the night at the new RNA office some blocks away. Nevertheless, a smaller force of police and FBI agents also surrounded this building. At the residence following a predetermined plan, the police and agents supposedly seeking a fugitive who was not there gave the sleeping occupants 90 seconds to come out and then opened fire onto the back bedroom window with lethal rockets carrying gas charges. In the general firing that followed, a police lieutenant was unalived and a policeman and an FBI agent were wounded. At the new RNA office, Brother Amir walked out of the office and challenged the policemen and agents as they moved in. All four here were arrested, as were the 7 at the house. All suffered no injuries in the heavy firing and gassing at the house, but were beaten and trussed afterwards. All 11 were originally charged with murder and lodged at Perchman Prison Farm. Nine were also indicted by the U.S. for conspiracy to assault federal officers and for having assaulted them. In 1972, in 3 separate trials for murder held an racially charged atmosphere, Vice President Hakima was sentenced to life. Ofega Kwandas was sentenced to life. Karim, Najabi Fadua was sentenced to life, and Adias Obaba received 2 10-year terms. The 3 people at the office with Amir were released by habeas corpus actions after 2 months. Sister Nigeria was released after 3 months because she was pregnant. Sister Tamu was released after 10 months. Brother Chama after 14 months, and Amira after 20 months. Thank you for putting those in. Who's in here? No one else is in here. Okay. But the months after Amir's release on $25,000 federal bond, the U.S. federal government moved to take the 9 whom they had indicted to trial. 7 were found guilty, and everything charged by the racist jury in Biloxi, Mississippi, the home of trial judge Walter L. Nixon, who had moved the trial there, the site with the least black people in the division, over the objection of defense attorney. The one elderly black man on the jury was obviously terrorized by the other jurors. The convictions were appealed and argued before 3-judge 5th Circuit panel in New Orleans on October 16, 1974. In March 19, 1976, the 5th Circuit freed Tamu, but confirmed all the life sentences. The Mississippi Supreme Court was confirmed all the life sentences, and the U.S. Supreme Court was already refused to review them. Already refused to review them. The U.S. Supreme Court has also refused to hear the appeal of the federal conviction. The struggle for the RNA prisoners of war is our struggle. They, like ourselves, are being moved on by the U.S. government in the attempt to keep the nation subjugated. And that's the end of that one. Next one. Transforming the colonial and criminal mentality. Revolutions are fought to get control of land, to remove the absentee landlords and gain control of the land and the institutions that flow from that land. The black man has been in a very low condition because he has had no control whatsoever over any land. he has been a beggar economically and a beggar politically, a beggar socially, a beggar even when it comes to trying to get some education. The past type of mentality that was developed in this colonial system among our people today is being overcome. And as the young ones come up, they know what they want, land. And as they listen to our beautiful preachings about democracy and all those other flowery words, they know what they're supposed to do, to have land. So you have a people today who not only know what they want, but also know what they are supposed to have. And they themselves are creating another generation that is coming up. That not only will know what it wants and know what it should have, but also will be ready and willing to do whatever is necessary to see that what they should have materialized immediately. This is El Hajjaj Malik, El Shabazz Malcolm X, Black Revolution from Malcolm X Sparks. That's the little quote. And here we go. During a conversation with a comrade, the movie Battle of Algiers was mentioned within the context of using that film as a way of making a comment on the present and probable direction that many prisoners are taking, and that many more will take in the escalating class of national liberation struggles inside U.S. borders. An apology is made in advance should we make errors in our recollections and of events taking place in the film or the order of their appearance. In the opening scene or in one of the early scenes, the setting as it is a prison, and the principal character was we believe portrayed as a Ali Aponti. Ali Aponti was an Algerian who had entered the prison as a common criminal or a bandit, and was then in the process of being politicized and politically educated himself. He was being approached by a revolutionary, a prisoner of war, who had noticed Ali's strong sense of nationalism and his revolutionary potential. Thus, his potential had of becoming a revolutionary nationalist rather than his remaining a bandit or a criminal or a lumpen with nationalist sentiment and emotional commitment to nationalism. We know this already sounds familiar to many. I've been in rebellion all my life. Just didn't know it. Comrade Brother George Jackson. That's his quote. And for a young new African black person growing up in the ghetto, the first rebellion is always crime, end quote. A clear distinction must be drawn between rebellion and revolution, because unless this is done, we become confused in our thought and our actions. Arriving at clarity on this and other issues is a necessary aspect of transforming the criminal and the colonial mentality. We can rebel against something without necessarily rebelling or making revolution for something. A rebellion is generally an attack upon those who rule, but it is an attack which is spontaneous, short-lived, and without the purpose of replacing those who rule. Rebellions bring into question the methods of those who rule, but stop short of actually calling into question their very right to rule. Without calling into question the entire authority and the foundation upon which that authority is legitimacy rests. We rebels as a means of exposing intolerable conditions and treatment, but we seek to have someone other than ourselves change these conditions and to change the treatment rather than to assume responsibility ourselves for our whole lives. The rebellion essentially wants to end bad housing, have, quote, full employment, and end police brutality and change prison conditions, etc. To reform the system and leave the power to make these reforms in the hands of the of the massa, the master. A revolution, on the other hand, seeks not merely to reform their system, but to completely overthrow it, and to replace the power for overthrowing it and the power for running the new system that is established in the hands of the revolutionary masses. Thus, the slogan, all power to the people. And we got some more quotes here. It is hard to, It is hard to go beyond rebellion to revolution. It is in this country because of the widespread belief that revolution can be made as simply and instantly as one makes coffee. Therefore, the tendency is to engage in acts of aventurism or confrontation, which the rebels believe will bring down the system quickly. It's always much easier for the oppressed to undertake an adventuristic act on impulse than to undertake a protracted revolutionary struggle. The protracted revolutionary struggle requires that the oppressed masses acquire what they never start out with: confidence in their ability to win a revolution. Without that confidence, the tendency of many militants is towards martyrdom, in the hope that their death may at least become the inspirations to others. Revolutionary thinking begins with a series of illuminations. It is not just plodding along according to the list of axioms, nor is it leaping from peak to peak. A revolution initiates a new plateau, a new threshold, but it is still situated on the continuous line between past and future. It is the result of both long preparation and a profoundly new and profoundly original beginning. Without a long period of maturing, no profound change can take place. But every profound change is at the same time a sharp break with the past. What is the relations between wants and thoughts, between wants and needs, between masses and the revolutionists? Masses have wants which are not necessarily related to human needs. Revolutionists must have thoughts about human needs. They cannot just rely on the spontaneous outbursts of the masses over their wants. A revolutionist must absorb and internalize the lives and the passions and the aspirations of great revolutionary leaders, and not just those of the masses. It is true that revolutionary leadership can only come from persons in close contact with the masses and movements, and with a profound conviction of the possibility of profound change in a new society about the accelerated struggles of the masses. But leaders cannot get their thoughts only from the movement of the masses. A revolution begins with those who are revolutionary, exploring and enriching their nation of a, quote, new man / woman, and protecting the nation of this, quote, new man / new woman, into which each of us can transform ourselves. The first transformation begins with those who recognize and are ready to assume the responsibility for reflecting on our experiences and the experience of other revolutionary men and women. Thus, the first transformation can begin with our own rethinking. That is why we believe it is so crucial that before we undertake to project the perspectives for New African Revolution, we review what previous revolutions of our epoch have meant in the evolution of man / womankind. As we study these revolutions, the first thing we shall learn is that all the great revolutionists have projected a concept of revolution to the masses. They did not just depend on the masses or the movement of their day for their idea for what should be done. They evaluated the state of the world and their own society. They internalized the most advanced ideas about human development, which had been arrived at on the world scale. They projected They projected a vision of what a revolution would mean in their own society. They analyzed the different social forces within their country carefully and ascertained which forces could be mobilized to realize this vision. They carried on ideological struggles against those who were not ready to give leadership to the masses or who were trying to lead them in the wrong direction. Only then did they try to lead their own masses. The failure to make a similar distinction between the rebellion and revolution is what prevents many bloods from recognizing and then making the transformation from captive colonials to political prisoners, and prevent those outside of the wall from making the transformation from colonial subjects to conscious citizens and achieving cadres and active cadres. It prevents us from consciously and systematically, quote, bringing up the new generation who know the difference between New African reform and rebellion. The New African Revolution, it prevents us from consciously and systematically creating new African revolutionary leadership to lead the revolutionary movement as opposed to new forms of civil rights struggles under bourgeoisie leadership for bourgeoisie ends. It prevents us from making a class analysis of the forces inside our own neo-colonized nation so that we can carefully ascertain exactly which force can be mobilized to realize the vision of a new African revolution. Most comrade brother George Jackson's words are familiar to us. Prisons are not institutionalized in such a massive scale by the people. Most people realize that crime is simply the result of a grossly disproportionate distribution of wealth and privilege, a reflection of this present state of property relations. And we must educate the people in the real causes of economic crimes. We must be made to realize that even crimes of passion are the psychosocial effects of an economic order that was decadent in human and hundreds years ago. All crime can be traced to objective socioeconomic conditions, socially productive or counterproductive activity. In all cases, it is determined by the economic system, the method of economic organization. Many prisoners and many people outside the walls, many political prisoners and even some POWs have, we believe, not taken the interpretation of the above words far enough. We feel this way because many comrades have based many of their beliefs and positions on the inherent revolutionary capacity of the lumpen, on their understanding of the above quoted statements. We tend to overlook the fact that Comrade George was making a broad analysis, describing objective factors and presenting a general ideological perspective. The grossly disproportionate distribution of wealth and privilege and the, quote, crime that results from it does not automatically make us revolutionaries. The real causes of crime are not necessarily not of themselves. The causes of commitments to revolutionary struggle, objective economic conditions, the method of economic organizations are not themselves factors which inspire and or cement conscious activity in revolutionary nationalist people's war. Comrade George described the objective set of conditions, the economic base of crime, and he recognized that he had been objectively in rebellion in his all his life. He also said, quote, just didn't know it. He wasn't aware of his acts as being forms of rebellion. He wasn't conscious of himself as a victim of social injustice, and he wasn't consciously directing his actions towards the destruction of the enemy. This is George Jackson. I met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao, and they redeemed me For the first 4 years, I studied nothing but economics and military ideas. I met black guerrillas, George Big Jake Lewis, and James Carr, W.C. Nolan, Bill Christmas, Tony Gibson, and many others. We attempted to transform the black criminal mentality into a black revolutionary mentality. And comrades ask in the past, quote, what is the difference between these mentalities? Primarily because it was hard to see the difference, and it had been assumed that there was no difference between the lumpen and the outlaw or the revolutionary. Who's in the... Are we doing good so far? Are we doing good so far there, Doodley? Everybody else doing okay? Hello. Good so far. All right, good. Some bloods simply wanted the lumpen to be the outlaw, the revolutionary, and some say that this was what George said. George said that the revolutionary was a lawless man because revolution is illegal in America. Thus, the revolutionary, the outlaw, and the lumpen would make the revolution. Some bloods read revolutionary actuality into a potentiality alluded to by George in his analysis of the economic basis of crime. This is also related to the learning by rote, R-O-T-E, of Marxist-Leninism, and to the overemphasized of the economics of Marxism, a failure to grasp the significance of the conscious elements. The materialist doctrine that men are the product of circumstances and education, that changed men are therefore the products of other circumstances, and of the different education forgets that circumstances are the fact changed by men, and that the educator himself must be educated. Marx's philosophy holds that the most important problem does not lie in understanding laws of the objective world and thus being able to explain it, but to apply the knowledge of these laws actively to change the world. Only social practice can be the criterion of truth. Mao. In order for us to know Ali's Aponti today as an Algerian revolutionary, he had to become politicized, consciously joining with the Algerian FLN, and point his pew-pew at the enemies of the Algerian people. The employment of the skills he acquired and sharpened as a bandit continued to violate the law of the colonial state, but the difference was fundamental. And Aponti's previous violations of the colonialist state law were violations of an individual for personal gain, but more important, there were seen even by him at that stage as true, quote, violations of law, because the law and the state that it upheld were still recognized by Aponti as being legitimate. He was a criminal because he still saw himself as a criminal within the definition of the practice of colonialist oppression. This is an aspect of the criminal and the colonial mentality, continued recognition and acceptance of the legitimacy of colonial rule, to continue to feel that the colonial state has a right to rule over the colonized. And here's another one. For every system of state and law, the capitalist system above all exists in the last analysis because its survival and the validity of its status are simply accepted by the colonized. The isolated violations of those statutes because the isolated violations of those statutes does not represent any particular danger to the state as long as such infringements figured in the general consciousness merely as isolated cases. Oh my gosh, I can't do it. I can't say this word. Can you say this word real quick? Are you there, Doodley?
I apologize. No. I'm having to do some housework.
Okay, no worries. I'm gonna try it. Dostoevsky. Can you put that in the comments?
Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky has noted in his Siberian Reminiscence how every criminal feels himself to be guilty without necessarily feeling any remorse. He understands with perfect clarity that he has broken laws that are no less valid for him than for everyone else. And these laws retain their validity even when personal motives or the force of circumstances have reduced him to violate them. It says George Lucas, but it's not George Lucas that we think of. Legality and illegality. History of class consciousness studied in Marx dialectics. When we break this down more, we see the key phrases are those pointing to the isolated violations of the oppressive state's laws. Isolated violations because they do not represent a danger to the oppressive state. And they do not represent a danger to the oppressive state because they continue to, quote, figure in the general consciousness merely as isolated cases. Now, quote, general consciousness represents both the general consciousness of individuals who have not yet come to recognize the oppressive state as illegitimate, and it represents the general consciousness of the masses of the oppressed, because we continue to regard the masses as a legitimate rightful authority. We continue to feel that the laws it imposes upon us are laws, quote, that are no less valid for us than for anyone else, end quote. So they're saying basically the colonial state laws are not for us, they're to keep us subjugated and oppressed. They're to keep the state secure. They are no less valid for us than anyone else. This is why we can feel guilty without feeling remorse. The lack of remorse stems from the bad conditions we know to exist, which, changing the page, become the reformist oriented, rebellious tendencies, quote unquote. As long as we continue to see the oppressive state as legitimate ruler, even the circumstances of personal motives which pushes us towards, quote, crime continue to be isolated cases, presenting no danger to the foundations of the oppressive state and offering no benefits towards the struggle of independence and socialism. This quote, criminal colonial mentality was similarly described by Comrade Sister Sada Shakur. Quote, I am sad when I see what happens to women who lose their strength. They see themselves as bad children who expect to be punished because they have not in some way conformed to the conduct required of good children in the opinion of prison guards. Therefore, when they are punished, they feel absolution has been dealt, and they are again in a good grace of the guards. Approval has been given by the enemy, but the enemy is no longer recognized as an enemy. The enemy becomes the material figure patterning their lives. It's like the plantation in prison. You can see the need for a revolution clearly. Before Comrade George met Marx and the black guerrillas, his mentality was best characterized as criminal. It was only after he was redeemed that he was able to see himself as a victim of social injustice, that he was able to know that his past criminal acts had been an embryonic form of rebellion. had constituted a tendency of potential for undermining the oppressive state's authority, its prestige and legitimacy of its law, and to overthrow it. The prestige of power as subjective effects, as a past deed or reputation, real and financed, then has a very definite life process. The prestige of the capitalist class and inside the U.S. reached its maturity with the close of the 1860s and 1864 Civil War. Since that time, there have been no serious threats to their power. Their excess have taken on a certain legitimacy through long usage. Prestige bars any serious attack on power. But do people attack a thing they consider with awe, with a sense of legitimacy? In the process of things, the prestige of power emerges roughly in that period when power does not have to exercise its underlying basis, violence. Having proved and established itself, its draft, secure from any serious challenge. Its automatic defense attack instincts remain alert. Small threats are either ignored away, laughed away, or in the case of that many build into something dangerous, slapped away. To the master of capital, the most dreadful omen of all is revolutionary scientific socialism. The gravedigger invokes fear response. Prestige wanes if the first attack on its power base finds it wanting. Prestige dies when it cannot prevent further attacks upon itself. Conrad, Brother George Jackson. To unalive the prestige of the oppressive state is, first of all, to unalive the image of its legitimacy in the minds of the people, to transform the criminal mentality and the colonial mentality into a revolutionary mentality, is to destroy within the minds of the people the sense of awe in which they hold the oppressive state. For Comrade George to become first the political prisoners and then the prisoner of war, he had to move beyond the mere understanding of the objective economic laws and the relationship to crime. He had to begin applying his knowledge of revolutionary activity aimed towards changing the world, towards changing these objective economic laws and eradicating their efforts upon the people. We know George today as a revolutionary because he educated himself and then went on to change existing circumstances. If we were to leave the objective analysis understanding of the economic base of crime and proceed to no further, we end up legitimizing the dope pushers in our communities, the pimps and other backward reactionary elements who engage in such activities because of the circumstances caused by the present economic order. We can't continue to say, quote, the devil made me do it, end quote, if we don't move beyond the explanations of objective socioeconomic conditions and consequently don't move beyond the acceptance of criminal activity on the part of the lumpen as somehow honorable and inherently revolutionary simply because they reflect the present state of property relations. What we will end up doing is condoning these relations in practice, if not in words. We will end up accepting the ideology behind those relations as well. Revolution within the modern industrial capitalist society can only mean a overthrow of all existing property relations and the destructions of all institutions that directly or indirectly support the existing property relations, private property that is. It must include the total suppression of all classes and individuals who endorse the present state of property relations or who stand to gain from it. Anything less than this is reform. That's from His Blood in My Eye. George Jackson again. What's up?
I want to say something about this.
Huh?
I talk about this a lot when it comes to like you know how I mentioned politics that are affirmative and politics that are based in denial. This is also speaking on that. How when your politics are based in the denial of the current rather than the affirming of like one's own, it's going to lead to a continuation of the system because it's still centering the thing being denied because it's centering the denial.
And this also goes into the effect of like the revolution will not be televised because within ourselves we have to realize these things and develop into this stage of development, you know? So yeah. Okay. And this applies. Okay, you good? You went on mute. This applies not only to those who rule, to the monopoly capitalists, the world runners. It applies to the lumpen as well. Actually, for those who are not incorporated into the system for whatever reason, capitalist society provides its own alternatives. Organized crime in the ghetto. This alternative is legitimized by the fact that so many people are forced to engage in at least petty illegal activities in order to secure a living income. The pervasiveness of the lucrative numbers of rackets and dope peddling rings furthering enhances organized criminality in the eyes of underdeveloped communities, youth. Social scientists have observed that the role of criminals is one model to which such youth can reasonably aspire. It provides a realistic career objective, certainly more realistic than hoping to become a diplomat or a corporation executive. Consequently, many underdeveloped youths turn to illegal activity, car thievery, pimping, prostitutions, housebreaking, gambling, dope pushing, etc., as a way to earn an income. Those who don't turn to crime still come into contact with and are affected by the mystique of organized mystique of organized crime. The mystique, is that mystique? I think it's mystique. Is that mystique? Let me make sure. I'm gonna make sure. Hey. Yeah, I was right. Mystique. Which is widespread in the underdeveloped communities. They use the G word. I'm going to say it one more time. Ghetto. We're going to say underdeveloped communities. These mystiques assert that it is possible to spit in the face of the major legal and moral imperatives of American capitalist society and still be financial success and achieve power and influence. To the extent that the Panthers were successfully in penetrating the hardcore of the undeveloped communities and recruiting black youth, it would seem that they would be forced to confront the social implications of organized crime and its meaning for black liberation. They were well equipped to do this, since many of their own activities and leaders, such as Cleaver, were ex-criminals. Cleaver did attempt to present such an analysis shortly before he disappeared from public view, but he did not take his analysis far enough, and consequently his conclusions were severed to confuse the matter further. Numerous sociological studies have shown that in many respects, organized crime is only the reserved side of American business. It provides a desirable, though proscribed goods and services which are not available to the public through, quote, normal business channels. And although there is much public ranting against crime, organized crime, and it must be organized to succeed as a business, enjoys a certain degree of immunity from prosecutions due to the collisions of police and public officials. Moreover, organized crime constantly seeks, as would any good corporation, to expand and even legitimize its own power. But it is not serious motive to revamp the present social structures, because it is that structure that with all its inheritance, flaws and contradictions, which provide a climate in which organized crime can flourish. Hence, it comes as no surprise that in at least one major riot in Baltimore, police recruited local criminals to help quell the rebellion. The criminals gladly collaborated with the cops because heavy looting during the riot had seriously depressed prices for stolen goods and otherwise disrupted the illegal business operation upon which the criminals depend for their livelihoods. Cleaver is, in his analysis, however, misread the social functions of organized crime. In speeches and articles, he voiced approval of such underworld notables as Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly, on the grounds that their criminal activities were instrumental in building the present power of ethnic groups such as the Italians and the Irish. He concluded that beneath the public facade there is a history of intense struggle for ethnic group power in urban centers of America, and that organized criminal activity was played on an important part of the advancing the status of various groups. But Cleaver failed to note that organized crime has sought to advance itself totally within the framework of the established society. It seeks more power for itself, and as a side effect, it may bring more money into the hands of this or that ethnic group. But organized crime is far from being a revolutionary force. On the contrary, its social function is to provide an informally sanctioned outlet for impulses that officially are outlawed, like revolutions, and thereby acts to unhold and preserve the present social order. Cleaver's analysis, to the extent that it reflects Panther thinking, revealed that the organization's uncertainty about its objectives. This problem stemmed from an inadequate analysis of the manifold ways in which the American social structure absorbs neutralized dissent. Robert L. Allen, Black Awakening in Capitalist America. There is a scene sequence of Battle of Algiers where Al Capone, the ex-criminal, Ali Aponte, the ex-criminal, the revolutionary nationalist, and member of the FLN, confronts lumpen/criminal elements who are surviving the best way they know how. Under the existing circumstances, Ali makes his confrontation in accordance with the FLN view that a week of disorganized, demoralized, and diseased people cannot successfully attack and defeat the enemy. The pimps, adult pushers, and otherwise backward elements were asked, warned, encouraged to find other means of survival, means which would be more in tune with the needs and directions of the people. The national liberation struggle. The backward elements resisted the transformation of their mentalities, and thus placed themselves squarely in the path of the nation's progress. Ali Aponte responded to his refusal to this blocking of progress and national salvation with a short burst from his Thompson. So what they're saying is, yes, we might be lumpen, but we need to develop a revolutionary character, an internationalist presence, and a scientific socialist outlook. Or liberation process. So even as lumpen, we have to change our mentality to the mentality of a revolutionary thinking.
Yeah, because the non-lumpen aren't the only ones that can capitulate.
Yeah. The lumpen, as you can see, and it's true that the lumpens do capitulate, you know. But that's why you got it, like we agreed on. We have to develop a revolutionary character, you know, instead of fortifying the relations of capital and colonialism. You know what I mean? What we said about the need for conscious awareness and conscious activity in order for there to be a transformation of the colonial mentalities into revolutionary mentalities also applies to the definition of political prisoners and prisoners of war. We think that Howard Moore definitions of political prisoners, as quoted by Comrade Brother George Jackson in Blood in My Eye, is sufficient. All black people, wherever they are, wherever their crimes, even crimes against other black people, are political prisoners because the system has dealt with them differently than with whites. Whitey gets the benefit of every law, every loophole, and every benefit of being judged by his peers. Other white people, black people, don't get the benefit of any such jury trial by peers. Such a trial is almost a cinch to result in the conviction of a black person. And it's a conscious political decision that black people don't have those benefits. That's true. Even in Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton, he talked about that too. This definition is cool. This definition is cool for helping to explain the colonial relationship that black people have to America as a people, but it fails to lay out the true, proper, and necessary criteria for political prisoners. Practice is that criteria. On the bottom line, political prisoners are revolutionaries. They are conscious and active servants of the people. Political prisoners direct their energies towards the enemy of the people. They do not commit crimes against the people. They say that Moore's definition and any look at this. I have to appeal again. Yay! The decision is too strict. That's my thing. There we go. Where was I at? We say that Moore's definition and similar definitions is inefficient because it simply defines the situation of new African black people vis-a-vis the oppressive state. The definition says that all new African people, the whole new African nation, have a particular political relationship to America, which is clearly separate and distinct from the political relationship that white people share with their government and its institutions. But this definition is insufficient from the perspective of the theory put forth by the nation with the aim of building consciousness and providing a guide in the successful execution of a struggle for national liberation. In developing and spreading such a theory, it becomes necessary to analyze, quote, the different social forces within the nation, carefully to ascertain these forces can be mobilized to realize the vision of a new society. In book 2 of the journal, the following position was put forth in regards to captive colonial political prisoners and prisoners of war. Move to define African political prisoners and prisoners of war must also be within the context of national liberation revolution. Remember that we're in the process of freeing and building a nation. The first major problem we run into is a present tendency to view all African prisoners as political prisoners. There are reasons why many or most of us say that all Africans in prison are PPs or POWs. Some folks start from the fact that of our kidnapping and enslavement more than 3 centuries ago and the continuous struggle to break the chains. Does some folks deal with the fact of objective socioeconomic conditions and trace the cause of all crime to this source. By this means to say that political economic circumstances make all those who become a victim of them automatic political prisoners and or prisoners of war. Still others point to the enemy, criminal justice system, which deals with Africans in ways different from whites. That's why the TikTok got mad at me. The point is that all these definitions simply point to the objective colonial relationship. The objective existence of African people enslavement over 3 centuries ago don't alone make for national liberation. The objective conditions of socio-economic of our neo-colonial status don't alone make for building a nation. The objective reality of a criminal justice system which operates throughout the empire and touches neo-colonial subjects as well as the oppressed inside the mother country, but treats the oppressor nation national differently from those of the oppressed nations, don't alone make for the independence of socialist developments of New Africa. What we got to see more clearly is that while all colonial subjects are, quote, the same vis-a-vis the oppressor, one of the requirements for genuine and successful national liberation revolution is the making of an analysis of the oppressed nation social structure. The condition that all Africans in America experience are essentially the objectively colonial. But this does not mean that all African people have the same revolutionary capacity or inclinations. When we define all African prisoners as political prisoners and or POWs, we aren't really defining political prisoners. We're simply defining African prisoners as colonial subjects, captured colonial subject. Plain and simply, our objective status as colonial subjects gives the political content of our entire lives, our overall conditions and experiences. Yeah, all Africans are POWs and PPs, whether inside or outside of prison. If we simply deal from our status as neo-colonized nations, but in dealing in this way, we only see ourselves as opposed to the oppressors, and the implications of this view are that we only perceive a reform of the oppressor system, so that will be treated the same and with equality with the oppressor and the masses in the oppressor nation. Such a view is not revolutionary and runs counter to other theoretical and political lines rooted in colonial perspectives and aimed towards independence and state power, the building of nations based on class analysis and of the colonized people. If we continue to see nothing but all Africans are POWs and PPs, we'll end up struggling against imperialism, but not necessarily for national liberation. Saying that all Africans are political prisoners is, if the truth to be told, is essentially idealist and bourgeois nationalist position. It would allow stool pigeons and all kinds of backward and reactionary elements to claim the status of political prisoners and even POWs, simply by pointing out that they are in America against their will and had their culture destroyed, etc. Such a position actually liquidates the politics behind the status of political prisoners and prisoners of war, thus in the same process liquidating the politics behind the struggles for national liberation. All new Africans in America are members of an oppressed nation, which in itself is political and lends automatic political meaning to the conditions suffered by us all, whether in prison or out. But the recognition of the political significance that our colonial status does not define revolutionary nationalist consciousness or practice. Recognizing objective colonial status is the point of departure, but we won't begin the journey of nation building without an analysis of our own internal neo-colonial social structures, just as we see the need for class analysis to take place outside the walls. The same analysis must take place for those inside the camps. Thus, we say that in making our analysis of the notion and in focusing particularly on those of us outside the camps, we see three sectors: the captured colonials, the political prisoners, and the prisoners of war. The captured colonials are the mass general prison population which Africans comprise. The simple status of the 20th century slave gives political character and significance to us all, but it doesn't determine whether the political character and significance will be bad or good or bad for the nation and the struggle. The new African nation in America was formed because of and during the battles with Europeans in which we lost our independence. During our enslavement, the many nations and tribes from the continent shared one history, developed essentially on consciousness, acquired objectively one destiny, all as a result of the suffering we all experience as a dominated new African nation. But so far as the struggle is concerned, it must be realized that it is not a degree of suffering and hardship involved as such that matters. Even extreme suffering in itself does not necessarily produce the prize, de-consciousness required for national liberation struggle. Amilcar Cabral, Revolution in Guinea. While the criminal acts of all Africans are the result of our general economic, political, and social relationship to the oppressive imperialist states, there is no automatic, unquestionable revolutionary nationalist capacity and consciousness. If we say that crime is a reflection of the present state of property relations, then we must also say that for us, these relations are those between the dominated nation and its oppressor and exploiters. The method of economic organization which governs our lives is an imperialist, a neo-colonialist method. Although this colonial system is structured so as to force many of us to take what we need in order to survive, although there are conscious political decisions made by the oppressor once, we find ourselves in the grips of his criminal justice system. It must also be seen that a conscious political decision must also be made on the part of the colonial subject before his act can have a subjective, functional political meaning within the context of national liberation struggle. Analyzing and the definition of political prisoners in the context of the AI just did some fucking weird things just now. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got around four pages left, and then we'll stop. Put another way, if the criminal acts of Africans are the result of a grossly disproportionate distribution of wealth and privilege, which stems from our status as a dominant neo-colonized nation, then the only way to prevent crime among us is to make a conscious decision to liberate the nation and establish among ourselves a more equitable distribution of wealth and privilege. Thus, we see captured colonials. For us, political prisoners is one who has made and who acts on a conscious political decision to change the present state of property relations. Although the political prisoners and the prisoners of war levels of thought and practice sometimes overlaps, we use the element of organized revolutionary violence to distinguish between them, organized revolutionary violence of the distinct military type. That brings up another. We have to create an organized revolutionary, violence. So it has to be in order. Okay. Political prisoners are those arrested, framed, and otherwise imprisoned because of relative peaceful political activity against the oppressive conditions of the people. Political prisoners are also those captured colonials inside the walls who have adopted a, quote, revolutionary mentality and become politically active on the part of the PPs. Behind the walls results in denial of release, punitive transfers, harassment and brutality along periods of isolation, closed censorship of mail-in visits, behavior modification attempts, and even assassinations at the hands of prison administrators or sometimes employed reactionary prisoners to do their jobs for them. We regard as prisoners of war those Africans who have been imprisoned as a result of their having taken up arms or otherwise engaged in acts of organized revolutionary violence in its military forms against the U.S. imperialist state. The act of expropriation, acts of sabotage, intelligence and counterintelligence activities, and support activities when directly linked to acts of military organized violence and or organized groups, which are part of the armed front. Also, those activities of an overt or covert nature, which are linked to the actions of armed people's defense units. Those new Africans involved in such activities and imprisoned because of them are considered prisoners of war. We also regard a prisoner of war those captured colonials and political prisoners who have consciously committed acts of military organized revolutionary violence while behind the walls, as well as those who join or form organizations which are or will become part of the organized armed front and or part of the armed people's defense units of the mass front. Prestige bars any serious acts of power. Do people attack a thing they consider with awe, with a sense of its legitimacy? While destroying the legitimacy of the enemy, we must establish our own. The allegiance of the people must pass from the enemy state to the new Africa. Ali Apante's military activity was inspired by, complemented, and was guided by the politics of the FLN, was guided by the new revolutionary nationalist theory and practice of the emerging Algerian People's State. Ali could make no serious attack on the power of the colonialist state until its prestige has been destroyed. And this destruction of the colonialist state prestige and its substitution by the prestige, the legitimacy of the people's state. This does not take place all at once, but is a process it builds in stages. Decreeing that dope pushers must find other means of survival is a part of the process. Enforcing the decree is part of the process. Satisfying the needs of the people, involving the people in the actual control of their own lives, moving with the people and seizing and using the further development, control of the productive forces and means of production is the process in its essence. The socialist process. Yes. 3 more pages. 3 more pages, everybody. Ali Apante's elimination of pimps and dope pushers was the fulfillment of a state function. When Ali abandoned his criminal mentality and became a conscious revolutionary cadre, he became one of the most responsible members of the revolutionary people's state. Ali Apante, ex-bandit, aspiring revolutionary, was formally politicized in person, made a general commitment to the people, a particular commitment to the FLN, both of which had to first base themselves on the commitment to himself. We come to the scene in the film where we see Ali, after his release from prison, about to carry out an order using his skills for the first time in the conscious commission of a revolutionary rather than a criminal personal act. In brief, Ali has been told to walk in certain places at certain times where he'll be met by a sister carrying a piece inside a basket. He's to approach the sister, take the piece, and approach a dog from behind and render a bit of criticism. Then his then he's to return the piece to the sister's basket and then space. But rather than following these instructions, Ali takes the piece and jumps in front of the dog, waving the piece and running off at the mouth. When Ali's lungs were tired and his ego satisfied, he pulls the trigger, only to learn that the piece is empty. Ali had been tested, a test which reveals more than it was designed to. There are many factors involved in this process of successful revolutionary struggles, a successful party of organization. Only two of these factors are discipline and security. Discipline and security are concerns of parties and organizations, but parties and organizations are composed of individuals. What happens to each individual in the party or organization happens to the entire body, and vice versa. When Ali went back to this and screamed on comrades for giving him an empty piece, it was pointed out to him that the issue was not the empty piece, but Ali's failure to follow orders. This failure to follow orders endangered Ali, the sister, and in effect endangered the entire organization. Of course, in the general sense, any failure to follow instructions demonstrates a lack of one or a combination of several things. In this case, we think Ali's demonstrated that his commitment to himself, the people, and the organization was at the point in time still primarily emotional. When he jumped in front of the dog, he did so because he wanted to be seen. For him, at that point, his commitments were based heavily on the fact that the colonialists shouldn't see him as a man, as a human being. He wanted to be heard, to be recognized by the oppressor as slaves, colonial subjects. We tend not to feel worthy unless the oppressor in some ways acknowledges our existence. When Ali jumped in front of the dog, he demonstrated the emotionalism and commitment is one of the major hindrance in the development of the degree of sophistication we need for success. He demonstrated that at that point, the struggle for him was not yet a struggle for power, a struggle for self-government, and for seizure of property. Tests of the kind mentioned here, as well as other kinds, will continue to be necessary, and understanding of the practice of discipline and adequate security are things that more attention should have been devoted to before Ali was released from prison. More attention should have been devoted to ridding Ali of his emotional commitments and related lingerings of colonial mentality. We see this in Algeria, but most of us, it's better in places like Guinea-Bissau, Angola, and Zimbabwe. Cadres are sent to training schools. PAIGC cadres spent years in their schools in Conakry before they returned and began their work with the people. In other countries, where national liberation struggles were and are taking place, the leading bodies in the struggles have had schools established inside and outside the country where ideological and military training took place. ZANU cadre were so trained in Tanzania. Our cadres were being and will be trained in places like Stateville, Trenton, San Quentin, Attica, Angola, LA. Our cadres are in what we must occasionally, consciously recognize as training schools in Bedford Hills, Jackson, Terre Haute, Dwight, Atlanta, Alderson, and other prisons and jails in America. As Comrade Brother Sanatina Akulai has reminded us, quote, the jails and prisons are the universities of the revolutionaries and the finishing schools of the Black Liberation Army. Coming brothers and sisters, and meet Sada Shakur. She is holding seminars in Getting Down, Taming the Paper Tiger, and the selected works of Zadi Malik Shakur. So, brothers and sisters, do not fear jail and prison. Many of you will go away. Ignorance will be your crime. Others will come awareness. Their only crime. Sandanti Akulai, quote, from the bowels of the beast, a message from Break the Chains. The prisons and our communities must establish cadre training centers. There must be planned systematic programs to meet use when we arrive behind the walls. Seminars are part of a well thought out, concretized curriculum, organized. The prison movement, the August 7th movement, and all similar efforts educate the people in the illegitimacy of the establishment power and hint at the ultimate goals of revolutionary consciousness at every level of struggle. The goal is always the same: the creation of an infrastructure capable of fielding a people's army from one generation to the next, building to win a war for independence and socialism. All power to the people. And we'll stop right there, and we'll go the next chapter, scenes from battle of Algiers. So remember, everybody, don't do adventurism. If you're taught to do something and you're seeking orders in a revolutionary part, do the orders and don't stray away from them, because then you'd be taught a lesson that you weren't all the way ready. All right, Dooley, what would you like to say about what we read?
I like how it pointed out that we can't just follow the masses. The masses need to be educated, and they need to organize.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We also found out too that the revolutionary schools for black people, for black revolutionaries and non-white people, is within the prison systems, because like George Jackson and what they referred to, being a black revolutionary is illegal underneath the state. And so that's why that's one of the reasons why they're continuously criminalized too, because it would bring on solidarity, and like we get people like Fred Hampton that cross racial divisions to be able to organize and stuff, like creating the Rainbow Coalition. Yeah, and stuff like that, you know? And like they also said that we also need a class analysis too of the material base. We need both, because we have to destroy the material base in order to do a revolution, like I think a cultural revolution of smashing and destroying the superstructure, which arises from the material base and defines it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I like how it's analyzed that people also create the conditions as well as the system. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that was importantly pointed out by that person, because I've been noticing that a trend inside of those who claim to be Marxists is going towards mechanical materialism. Mm-hmm. Or I think when it comes to the more existential stuff, like Fanon and them, I think that they did an important thing on bringing back the person within the system.
So it also proves that we need to develop a system. So in a sense, Lenin is correct about creating dual power, a system outside of the system, because they talk about this book. In this book, they mentioned that they need to create black communes. They need to create a system outside the system that engages with the people and the masses to seek a revolutionary mentality. So yeah. So is anybody in the... go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree.
Okay. Does anybody in the comments have any questions that they'd like to put forward? All right. Doesn't look like it so far. Give it a little bit more time. Nope. Good read. Okay. We're good. All right. Cool. We're good. Now, anybody's allowed to come up and ask questions and talk. So don't think that you're not allowed up here. Anybody's up here. All right, then. I guess we have nothing else, Doodley, until next time tomorrow.
All right. Take care. See you later.
Everybody take care of themselves. What does it say? Mutual aid, connection, solidarity is imperative. Yep. Make sure to take care of yourself. Do